So I read 11 books in October, had a kind of unexpected book of the month. It was a solid month. Chapters below, as always, and my book of the month last. All right, let's kick it off with Michael Connelly's newest book, The Proving Ground. Michael Connelly is one of my favorite authors. He's Mr. Consistent. I could probably record a Connelly review and just say, Connelly does it again. He can't write a bad book because it proves true every single time that he comes out with a new book. This is a Lincoln Lawyer novel, and admittedly, the Lincoln Lawyer novels are not my favorite in Connelly's output, mainly because just legal thrillers are not my thing. Like, I read a John Grisham back in the day, and one was enough. Just, those are not my kind of stories in crime fiction that I gravitate towards. But this is another solid one. One of the things I like that Connelly does very well in a lot of his books is he keeps them current, and he often weaves in things that are kind of topical at the time. So in this story, there's a big element that the case is surrounding AI. And basically this artificial intelligence construct had convinced a teenage boy to kill his girlfriend. And Lincoln Lawyer is suing the company for its negligence. And it was a good story because anytime you're going up against a big company, you have kind of the themes of the corporate elites and how strong they are and all of that. The thing I was most disappointed with this book, though, because there was a big disappointment for me, is this was kind of advertised, even though it just does say a Lincoln Lawyer novel. It's advertised that Jack McAvoy's in the story. Jack McAvoy is a protagonist in 3 of Connelly's novels, including my favorite book by Connelly, The Poets. And I was excited to maybe see Mickey Haller, the Lincoln Lawyer, with Jack McAvoy in here as well. And McAvoy was barely in the story. In fact, his role in the story could have just been some other character that wasn't him. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But, I mean, it's Connelly. It's perfect plotting, solid story, great resolution. It's Connelly. He can't miss. All right, I'm going to talk next about It's a Wonderful Woof by Spencer Quinn. And you're saying that's an awfully odd title. Well, Spencer Quinn writes the Chet and Bernie mysteries, and Chet's the narrator, and Chet's a dog. And that's one of the joys of these. These are very light-hearted mystery stories. Spencer Quinn is the nom de plume of Peter Abraham, and Peter Abraham writes more gritty kinds of crime fiction and thrillers and things like that. And Spencer Quinn, his alter ego, is the one that tells these kind of lighter stories where we get Chet the dog narrating this new mystery that him and Bernie are trying to solve, and I really enjoy them. It's a form of crime noir, but the dog is the narrator as the first-person narrator, and I enjoy that aspect of it. If you love dogs and you like mystery stories, I mean, this series is a can't miss for you. Some of the stories are great, some of the stories are just okay, but they're all at least like good to great kind of, if I were on a tier list, most of them would be in that good to great category. So this is one that I actually listened to on audio, and I had tried one of these before. Several years ago, I tried listening to one of these on audio, and the audiobook narrator, Jim Frangione, he has a slow delivery, and I didn't feel that it matched the excitement of the dog telling the story, because it's a perfect depiction of a dog, and, you know, dogs kind of have, like, situational ADD at times, and are often excited, and he has kind of a slower delivery, so I hadn't gone back to listen to any audiobooks, but I've recently listened to some audiobooks faster than a 1.0, which is what I always do, and I found that his narration at a 1.2 was perfect because it was kind of faster. It had kind of the excitement that you get from a dog, and I thought the characterization actually came to life a lot better in that format. So I'll be continuing this series. I only have a couple left, but I do have the next one on audio, so I'll probably listen to that in the next couple of months. But I did enjoy It's a Wonderful Woof by Spencer Quinn. All right, on to Sci-Fi, and let's talk about the Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4 by Christopher Ruocchio. Upon completing this, I am caught up in the Sun Eater, and I'm so excited that when the book comes out, as I'm filming this next week, the book will be out. I'm very excited that I'll be caught up, and I'm looking forward to reading the last book sometime before the end of the year. And this short story collection was admittedly probably the weakest of the 4. There are only 5 stories in it, so that's kind of held it back a little bit. The other collections were a lot longer. The second and third collections were my favorite of the collections, but this one, there were only 5 stories, and honestly, I only liked two of them. I liked the Guns of Pharos, which I'd already read because I do own the Diamond edition of Empire of Silence, and it was in there. And then there was one called The Fangs of Vuanos. I don't know if I said that right, but that was another story that I enjoyed in here. There was an odd one in there with a kind of a Hadrian Marlowe, unreliable narrator type of story, but anyway, the collection itself wasn't that great, but it does have me caught up, and I am excited to finally finish The Sun Eater before the end of the year. You may have seen this next one. I shot a YouTube short. I don't shoot those very often, but I wanted to thank the publicist for sending me this one. But this is a saga double of Apprehension by Mary Robinette Kowal, and then, Red Star Hustle by Sam J. Miller. This is a pretty cool thing. This is Saga Press puts this out, and it's a double. So you have two books in one. They're both kind of short novels. I did not get to Red Star Hustle this month. I hope to get to that at some point. But I did read Apprehension by Mary Robinette Kowal, and I was really impressed with this. I had heard of the author before because she's a Hugo and Nebula winner, and that's the reason why I accepted the advanced reading copy from the publicist, because it was an author that I had heard about and thought I might want to read at some point. And I was really impressed with a few aspects of this story. First of all, it's a very interesting story. It's a far future kind of sci-fi thriller story, and the main character is a 78-year-old woman. So right there you get something a lot different than you get in a lot of stories. And this story, she is on a vacation of sorts at this foreign foreign planet, and she is on vacation with her son-in-law and her grandson, and they get embroiled into some political intrigue. But what's really interesting about this story for me was that this woman, she had been a soldier in a war on that planet, and this planet was now becoming an ally of this Federation or whatever it's called in this universe. And just kind of the subtle little bits of kind of themes surrounding character were fantastic, and I was really impressed with how effortlessly the author was able to do that. And that's probably because I know that she's written short fiction, and I know that the really good short fiction writers are very adept at that, giving you a lot in just a very concentrated burst. And I felt like I knew this character very, very well. It honestly made me think about, you hear stories of soldiers, like American soldiers that go back to like Vietnam or Korea where they fought wars there, and just the memories and how things have changed and how they have to kind of grapple with what the situation was when they were there the first time versus how it is now, and just those kind of themes just really permeated this. But it's a really fast-paced story. Again, it's only half of this volume. It was 250 pages. Very short novel. I can definitely recommend it, and I can definitely see myself reading more of this author. So if you've read other works by Mary Robinette Kowal, please let me know in the comment section below if you have any recommendations of places to explore her works, because I was really impressed with just her writing in this story, Apprehension. All right, up next is The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Leguin. So this is a fireside book club read that we did. This is Evie and Matt and Joanna and me, and I hosted this one, and we had a chat about this. We do this once a quarter, so if you want to get on board, I'll usually announce in my TBR videos what the fireside book club book each quarter is going to be. The four of us each nominate a book anonymously, and then the Discord votes and picks one of the four. And I'm glad the Discord picked this one because this was fantastic. So first of all, look at this. This is skinny. This is thin. And it's remarkable what can be done in a fine work of science fiction in just about 200 pages when you have a skilled author like Ursula K. Leguin. The writing's exquisite. I knew the writing was going to be great because I have read her Earthsea books. They're right here behind me. So I knew the writing was going to be great. But what I really like about this is one of those science fiction stories that just has an idea, and then she just executes the hell out of it. And what was interesting is I kept thinking about one of my favorite works of science fiction, because I kept thinking of it in terms of this being very similar, and that's Replay by Ken Grimwood. And what's interesting is in both stories they have just a central premise, and the execution is near flawless. What is cool about The Lathe of Heaven is that the story is about a man named George, and he has this uncanny ability where if he dreams something, and he dreams at night, it will come true and it will alter reality. And just the repercussions of that are very interesting, because in this story, every time he has a dream, something is different, whether it's in his personal life or something that may have even global ramifications. And the narrative just kept constantly changing, and I love that I did not predict any of it, of where it went. That was fascinating. But it starts off with George. He had been taking drugs to suppress his dreams, and he was getting them illegally, and he was kind of sentenced to having to do psychiatric care. And the psychiatrist, in learning about why he's really doing this, seems like he wants to exploit this skill that George has, or this talent, or whatever this is. And it just kept going. There's a lot of really interesting things that it brings up. What I love most is just that a lot of times when they're trying to control a dream, he would want to do something for the good of society, but there were always just unforeseen circumstances and different repercussions from what they thought would happen. And you see a constantly changing narrative here. It's fantastic. A really, really strong book. It would have been possibly my book of the month had not the big surprise come in this month. But I really enjoyed The Lathe of Heaven. It was a fun discussion with Evie and Joanna. Matt wasn't able to make it when we had it, but if you want to check that out, we did start spoiler-free. You can hear their thoughts about the story. And then if you have read it, we had some great discussions in the spoiler section, especially with the people that were there for the chat. They really enhanced our discussion. So big recommendation to The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Leguin. All right, this next one's a chunker. I had to do a quick cut because this went on too long, and with the cut, I forgot to say the name of the book. So this is Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. So first of all, this is over 1,300 pages, and there's no reason why it needed to be that long. Probably the most tragic aspect of this story is the fact that the last 400 pages are absolutely brilliant. But the first 900 pages, I keep using the term word vomit. And that's how I feel about the first half of this book. I almost quit this book about 600 pages in because I was bored out of my mind. And that is the opposite of what a Sanderson story is all about. Because he's so inventive. He has such a great imagination. His world, his magic. I mean, he's a great author. I mean, he's a favorite. The last time I did kind of an author summation where I tried to do the formula to determine my favorite authors, he made my top 10. And I felt the first 900 pages were beyond self-indulgent. And it almost made me quit the book, and it gave me pause as to whether I want to continue with Sanderson. Now, I am going to continue with Sanderson, and I am going to continue with Stormlight. I've seen some reviewers say both of those things, that they're done, like they're cutting ties at this point. And I certainly understand it, because I do feel in general Sanderson is taking his books a direction that I don't necessarily want to follow him, but I'm not at that jumping off point quite yet. Because the last 400 pages were great. I mean, Sanderson's a master plotter, so the plotting was superb at the end, as far as where everything went. The way that the loose ends got tied up were fantastic. Most of the character arcs really worked for me. Some of them didn't. Some of them are incomplete because this is only the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. So there were two characters in particular that I wanted to see a lot more of. And one kind of had a little bit of an arc that ended with a little bit of disappointment, but I hope to see more of her arc in the second half. And I'm hoping that she's one of the main characters of the second half, because she was one of my favorites in this series, and she didn't really have a huge role in this book. There were times that I didn't enjoy myself with this. I didn't like the direction of one of the characters who was kind of a warrior and is now like a therapist. And I know a lot of people love Sanderson's exploration of mental health, but I generally read fantasy to escape. If I wanted to read those types of things, I wouldn't pick up a fantasy story. I'd be picking up literary fiction and things like that. So those are some of the reasons why I don't like necessarily the direction he's going, but I gotta say the ending of this is super strong, and I felt very good about it. I read the last 400 pages quite quickly because I just felt the narrative was compelling, and I wanted to see where it went. But even with all of the Cosmere connections that I roll my eyes at a lot of times, I didn't mind them as much here because I thought that they all made sense. I do think that he actually showed a little bit of restraint a couple times, which is impressive because he tends to be over the top with everything. You know how he tends to over-explain things. He's always going to keep giving you more and more and more. But I felt that the ending of this book was strong enough for me to continue. Now, who knows when that's going to happen, because I think he's going to do another Mistborn trilogy, I think, and then he talked about some standalones. Like, I don't know why he wants to write Elantris and Warbreaker sequels, but I guess he wants to write those. But hey, he can write whatever he wants. He's one of the biggest names in fantasy right now. So kind of a mixed bag for me. Overall, I liked it. Overall, I will continue with Sanderson, and I do hope that maybe the trajectory of his stories continue to get better. I think one aspect of him is I have felt that he is getting worse, and I think part of the reason for that is that he's putting out so many books in such a short amount of time that I think because of the sheer quantity, the quality has dropped in his works. So I hope that there's a course correction here, because I do think he's a talented guy. I always mention how imaginative he is, and although I do feel that epic fantasy honestly is not his thing. I like his short fiction. I like his standalones a lot more than I do the big series of his. There's still enough there for me to continue reading him. All right, up next, Conan the Fearless by Steve Perry. Just a small town girl. No, not that Steve Perry, not the guy from Journey. This is Steve Perry, the author, who has written a lot of different worlds. He's written a bunch of Star Wars books. He's written some Conan books. He's written some Indiana Jones books, which I didn't even know those existed. But anyway, this is the third author I've read that has written Conan, because I read everything by Robert E. Howard, and then I've read 6 of the 7 Robert Jordan novels. And then my friend Kyle sent this to me. Thank you, Kyle. And I really enjoyed this one. This was on par with the Jordan novels. I think some of the Jordan novels were a little better, some were a little worse. But, you know, it's the titular character, one of the most important characters in the fantasy genre. Although originally sword and sorcery, but, you know, that's fantasy now. And don't you love these tour covers? I think I'm going to get all these tour paperbacks at some point, just to have all of these great covers. I miss old school fantasy covers. I think they're so much better back then than they were now. But I digress. Very fast-paced story. If there's one probably negative attribute of this one is I think that Steve Perry threw too much at Conan. There were like 5 villains, and they all seemed to converge at the same time at various points of the story with him. So that wasn't great, but I've read worse plot conveniences in stories, but I really like this. This was a great chaser to Wind and Truth, because that was about 1,300 pages. Took like 2 weeks to read, and I read this in a couple days, so it was a nice book to pick up after Wind and Truth, and I really enjoyed Conan the Fearless by Steve Perry. All right, the next 2 are audiobook listens that I can talk about together because they were originally one book, and that's Peace Talks and Battleground by Jim Butcher. I think 16 and 17 or 17 and 18 in the Dresden Files. They're the last 2 books until the new one comes out in January, which is great that I'm caught up with Dresden, so I'll be able to read that brand new with everybody else, 12 Months, which is coming out in January. Peace Talks and Battleground were originally one book, and it would have been one big epic book, and I wish it had stayed one big epic book, because I think that by separating it, it actually, I think, weakened both stories a little bit. Because Peace Talks is, a big portion of it is the setup for Battleground, which is literally a big battle, which takes 90% of that book. It's 90% action with about 10% falling action. And I feel that if it would have been one book instead of separate books, I think Battleground would have been stronger. Part of that, whatever they would have called the big epic book, because the battle, the big action sequences would have been primarily from like the 50% to the 95% instead of 0 to 90, because it got exhaustive and it felt cluttered and it just felt like a little bit too over the top. Now, I will say that there was perhaps the most impactful moment in the entire series, at least first or second, the other one being in Changes at the end of that book. But it was surprising in a way. It involved a character that I honestly expected. I'm being vague for spoilers. It's the end of a series, but I want my Dresden people to know what I'm talking about. It involved a character that I figured that this would happen to them at some point, but it shocked me that it happened in this book. And it's going to have some very interesting things going forward, I think. And basically how Harry will be affected by what happened in this book. But this is another one. The scale of this one is huge. This series, from where it started to where it is now, it's downright remarkable that this series that started as this kind of urban fantasy crime noir kind of mystery of the week type of book has layered into this huge thing, and I've really enjoyed it. This had so many really memorable scenes in both books. I did like peace talks as well, but I do feel that both of them were kind of lessened by them being separated because it was during pandemic and lockdown and paper shortages and all of that. But anyway, I really enjoyed them. I did a tier ranking list. If you missed that, go check that out. I tier ranked all of the Dresden books, so you can see where these ones end up as far as everything else. You can also see kind of the overall upward trajectory that the series has gone, because I'm totally invested in this series and it's become a favorite of mine. So I did enjoy Peace Talks and Battleground. Again, the audiobooks, James Marsters knocks it out of the park. I think crime noir works really well for audiobooks. And even though this is morphed into epic fantasy, it's still the first person narrative of Harry Dresden, so it's kind of still in that vein, and I think it works perfectly as an audiobook listen. All right, let's talk next about a series that I finished this month. The series is The Locke Institute by A.R. Witham, and this is the execution of Rooker Flynn. And the author sent this to me. I was an alpha reader for him like a year or two ago with an earlier version of the series, and I was super excited to read this because with at least the first version of the books, this was my favorite, and it remained my favorite. I really love the theme of friendship and brotherhood that is in this book. I don't think that there's enough of that in genre fiction. I think you see it more in literary fiction. You see, in genre fiction, you always see, you see lovers and things like that, but you don't always see just great friendships. And that was at the heart of this. And for me, that's why I love this book. But very fast-paced story, and it wraps up the story extremely well. Even having read the alpha version like 18 months ago or whatever, there were still a couple twists that got me even the second time through. And one scene in particular made me emotional at the end. But it's a really, really great series. It's set in the same world as The Legend of Black Jack. So if you've read that book, I would definitely pick up The Locke Institute. It is a bit darker in tone, but it still has kind of the same warm, fuzzy heart behind it as The Legend of Black Jack did. So I really enjoyed this, and this is probably a strong contender for my self-pub book of the year. And probably Locke Institute is going to be up for my book series of the year as well. So I really enjoyed The Execution of Rooker Flynn by A.R. Witham. So my book of the month was a bit of a surprise, and that is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. And it shouldn't have been a big surprise because I heard people talking about it and just praising it. And I'd read the author before. I can't remember the name of the book. I'll put it below. More Like This or something like that. Patrick Ness is a YA author, and at times in my career, I would often pick up a YA book just to see what my students are reading. And this is one that I read, and I remembered really enjoying it. And this is a story of a boy who is confronting the fact that his mother's dying of cancer, and he encounters a monster in his backyard. And it's one of those books, so like, I can't give away the ending, but it's one of those books that I was reading it, oh, this is very good, this is very good, this is very good, oh my god, I'm sobbing. It's one of those books that just sneaks up on you, and you realize the whole story is just I am so impressed with authors, Ness, Stephen King, other authors that paint the portrait of children so well, and all of the contradictions that are a child. As someone who teaches young people and has taught young people for over 25 years, I can very easily smell a rat when I read an author that doesn't understand young people, and Patrick Ness understands young people, and he understands kind of the this character going through this grieving process. And it read like a fairy tale, kind of a modern day fairy tale with a monster, and I loved it. It was so good. I just am so impressed by the book. But my book of the month, October 2025, it was a great month, but above them all was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This was another audiobook listen. Jason Isaacs just knocked it out of the park. So hey, that was October. It was a great month. Sorry, this wrap-up is a little later than usual. Really busy time of year for me. A lot of weekend events. I just haven't had the energy to turn on the camera and do this kind of thing. So I hope you enjoyed these books. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to talk with you in the comment section below. Just please label any spoilers. And let me know, what was your book of the month in October? I know we're halfway through November at this point, but I'd love to hear what the best thing you read last month was. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.